who's here. All these different time zones. Great fun. Hey, Becky. Just spotted you too.
All right. I have the screen recording going, so we're going to give it a try. Hope this works. If it doesn't, then we'll just have to have another session at a later date, and people can who aren't here with us can join in. But yeah, I'll give a quick overview. So I'm RoasterKat, and I work at Algrano. Emma works at Algrano, and I've been trying to understand, we hear the price crisis, the sea market's going up, and we're hearing this not just in coffee anymore, but like Bloomberg, New York Times, CNN, we're seeing it, in mainstream news that coffee prices are going crazy. And so the question I've been asking, and that I've been hearing a lot of roasters asking, is what is going on, and what does that mean for us in the specialty industry? So Emma and I have been talking a bit, and she's so full of knowledge on this topic. So I wanted to ask Emma questions with other people around so that you all can also hear and try and understand a little bit more the education that Emma's been sharing with me. Because it's who do you ask about these big questions? It can be really difficult to figure out, all of this, what's going on. So without further ado, Emma, do you want a brief introduction?
Yeah, amazing. So firstly, big thanks to Kat for actually organising this. Hi, Richard. Sorry, just spoke to you in the chat as well. So I'm Emma. I am the UK and Ireland sales manager for Algrano. I always kind of joke that my job is not sales, because it really isn't. My job is really education, and that is my history in coffee. I have kind of grown up as an educator in and around coffee, and I have a huge kind of drive and passion for supply chains and equitable supply chains. So hence what kind of drew me to Algrano. I think exactly what Kat said. We have things happening at the moment that nobody has ever experienced before, nobody's ever witnessed before, and people are really unsure what to do. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of is a lot of kind of information, a sudden flood of information, and people therefore kind of picking up snippets of that, and not necessarily always being able to ask direct questions. So the idea of this, the concept of this, is that you don't necessarily all sit there quietly, but you can ask. So we have already had some questions submitted, which Kat will start with in a moment, but that you also get to join in the conversation. Before we kick off, there's a couple of things I just want to say. So number one, I want to make this really clear that I am not a trader. Okay, I do not come from a trading background. I teach green coffee, I teach, supply chain education, and I work in the supply chain, but I do not come from a trading background. I'm also not a market speculator. So if anybody, if your first question is, what do I do? What's the market doing? I'm sorry, you're not going to get that answer today. We can talk facts, but we're not here to kind of speculate, essentially. The other thing I'm just going to say on a more personal note is that some of you will already know this because you've maybe seen him in other calls, or, maybe even in real life for some of you. But I do have 2 dogs that do share my office with me. And occasionally they like to join in. So if I suddenly mute myself, or if you see a spaniel just jump up at me, he's trying to join in the conversation, and he might just come to say hello. I've told him to be quiet, but you never know.
He's the speculator of the household.
Yeah, he rules this roost around here. Okay, so that's essentially the plan for today. I will try also to keep things to time, but I do love to talk, as a lot of you will already know. So we'll try and move through swiftly. But there will be, opportunity if you want to follow up with stuff afterwards as well, because I know sometimes people don't necessarily want to ask things in a public space. So if you find yourself with a question that you can't ask now, or you don't feel comfortable asking now, just reach out to us afterwards, okay? And we'll try and address that as well. Back to you, Kat. Let's do it.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Emma. And thank you for being willing to come and answer these questions, because it's very confusing and there's a lot to talk about. I also, we're going to keep to time. but out of consideration for everyone's time. But I think, yeah, all of these questions will merit, follow up and more investigation. And as things change. So this is kind of just, I wanted to create a space to first open up these conversations so that we can continue talking about this stuff. So the first question is what does the C price mean? How does this futures market work? It's a big question.
It's a massive question, a really big one to open with. And essentially, it's a very complex function. I think what is good for people to be aware of is that firstly, the C market is not a new phenomenon. It was first established in the late 1800s. So this is a system that has been in existence for a long time. It changed ownership in the 90s and then again in the 2000s, I think 2007, when it became ICE, the Intercontinental Exchange, which is who currently runs it. But essentially within coffee, we have two markets. So we have the New York market for Arabica, and then we have the London exchange for Robusta. Okay, so we're those of us that are involved in supply chains are often watching both of them. And both of them have behaved pretty wildly in the last few months. So yeah, really interesting stuff. So what is the purpose of the C market? Why does it exist? What is it about? In a very basic sense, the idea, the function of the C market was essentially to act as a kind of insurance for buyers and sellers. So the concept of the C market, the idea of it is that somebody that would be typically what we refer to as long with coffee, which would be in this example a coffee producer, somebody that has a physical supply of coffee. And then you would have a buyer, which is somebody that would typically always be what we call short. And when you're short, it means you need something, you require something, okay? So we have the function of a seller and a buyer. Now, it's hard to keep it simple, but I'm really going to try my hardest. The way that the futures market works is that you are not taking physical delivery of a physical thing in the present, in the now, okay? What you're actually doing is you are contracting something, a specific volume, and there is a limit on that. So we essentially refer to it as a full container load, but it's 37,500 pounds, which for those in the UK and Europe is just over 17 tons. So you can only kind of work on C market basis if you're looking at, pretty much full container loads, thereabouts. But we essentially would have a contract for delivery in a future period, okay? Now, what the C market doesn't take account of is anything like quality, variety, origin. It doesn't factor in any of that, okay? So you would have essentially a base level, which is the market price, and ICE actually release, and maybe Kat, we can give some references out either during this call or perhaps even afterwards as follow-up. So the Intercontinental Exchange, we're talking specifically Arabica here, the New York market, they release what we refer to as contract months. And those contract months will be in the future, okay? And on each of those contract months, they're updated every 15 minutes when the market is open. So what that means is that there is a price attributed to these future months, okay? So if you wanted to take delivery of a coffee in the future, so say for example you wanted delivery in November of this year, you would be looking at a future contract month. So that would likely be, say, September 2025, okay? So what that means is that when you're looking at an offer with a producer, if they are working on a C market basis, then you would be looking at the delivery schedule that you're looking for. And that actually means that sometimes the price you receive will be different. So we at the moment in the market are experiencing something known as backwardation, which is where the future price is lower than the current spot price. So essentially, the further out you look, the cheaper the coffee contract would be. Now, what we typically do in specialty coffee, and this is not specialty only, by the way, But when we're looking at specialty coffees that are maybe associated with the C market, because everybody thinks it's not, but trust me, it is. It's all linked. What we would do there is work on what we refer to as a differential basis. Now, a differential means either a premium or a discount that is given to a particular grade of coffee. So this is where, separate to the market price, we have the ability to have an additional function to pay a premium for the coffee. So let's say, for example, you have an offer from a producer in Honduras. They may give you a differential price, and that differential price, if it's a high quality coffee, a specialty grade, clean coffee, could be something like, I don't know, I'm plucking a figure here, don't hold me to this, but let's say maybe plus 90. So what that would mean in real terms is that your FOB price for that coffee, and FOB, for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with those terms either, means free on board. Some people call it freight on board, but it's an INCO term we use in logistics. And what that means is the price of the coffee export, so loaded onto the ship. What it doesn't include is finance. It doesn't include freight. It doesn't include insurance. It doesn't include in-housing or out-housing or warehousing. Okay, just to be clear on that. So what that means, if we have, say plus 90 or plus 100 on the differential from our producer in Honduras, is that we would take that day's or that month's market price as it is, and we would then add the differential of plus 100, and that plus 100 would translate into cents per pound. So for those of you that are in the States and are familiar with working obviously in dollars and cents and pounds, it's fairly straightforward. For those of you in Europe where you're maybe working with a different currency, we have to take into account also currency exchange, another factor that plays into the price of our coffee. But also we would be looking at a calculation. For those of you that aren't familiar, it's a bit complicated, but we essentially have to take the pound price and we times that by 2.20462. Okay, there you go, Kat. It's even more complicated for European roasters. So what we then get is our price either by pounds per pound or our per kilo price. Now, the way that the market would operate, I did warn you this was a big question, by the way, is that essentially you can do a couple of different things, right? You do not have to use the market as a mechanism. You could have a producer that wants to offer it on what we call a differential basis, which means that they would have the price open on their side, but you as a buyer could fix the price. So you could say, okay, that sounds good. I'm going to fix the price. I don't want to take a position in the market. Okay. And then you just get your end fixed price. The producer is free to leave the contract open on their side if they want to. They can also do fixed. It's up to them. And again, I'm speaking from an Algrano perspective because I'm not a trader, but what I am familiar with is how we work at Algrano. So we give complete autonomy to a producer as to how they want to offer that. And that's up to them. So then if you are a roaster and you say, okay, well, actually, I want to do this on a differential basis because maybe I think that the market might come down in the future. I've been reading, I've been doing research. I think the market's going to come down a bit and I don't need to fix the price yet because I have a long time until my container will ship. Then you could leave your contract open. Okay. So then in your coffee contract, what you would actually get is rather than a final price, you would have the market month, which is when your contract expires and you must fix by, plus your differential. So you don't actually know the final price at that point because the market can move. Now, it's interesting in the sense that I think what a lot of people get confused with the market, and it's understandable because it is a very confusing thing, is, well, how can a producer give me a diff? And then if the market moves one direction or the other, like they can fix at one point and we can fix at another point, and we can both basically end up getting different prices. Like, well, who covers the difference? And essentially, the short answer to that is the market covers the difference because it's to do with fixing and selling a contract, fixing and buying a contract. So there are other players in the market, which is why the C market functions. Okay, if there weren't others in the market buying those contracts, then the C market wouldn't exist. It couldn't exist. It would just be a straight contract between you and the producer, and that would be it. So the short answer is the market covers the difference. And I think that is a bit where a lot of people get very stumped. They get very confused. Well, I've paid a lower price because the market moved in my favor, but the producer managed to fix at a point when the market was higher. So they've done well and I've done well. So that's kind of in as brief as I can possibly make it, nutshell, like what the kind of function of the market is. Now, does that mean that I sit here as the biggest fan of the C market? No. I wouldn't say I'm the world's biggest fan of it. Do I understand its need? Yes. Do I think that it can be beneficial for both buyers and sellers? Yes. And I've seen this and I've experienced this. I think some of the things we have to factor in are instability, why we're all here. This crazy movement in the market that was not only, I think, for a lot of people, a shock, but it was also incredibly quick. And everybody was like, it's going to come down in December. I'll book after Christmas. And then they got back to their desks in January and went, oh my gosh, what's happening? It's going up and up and up and up. And it felt like for a while we were pretty much hitting all-time highs every day, right? So it's been a wild ride. And you would be right to be concerned, confused, unsure what to do, because we've never seen this before in the market. I think the other thing that is kind of good to point out is that there are other operators in commodities markets. So futures markets don't only exist in coffee. We have futures markets for other commodities. And within that, you have people that we call speculators. And speculators can be groups of people that essentially have the liquidity to, let's say, play in the market. So these speculators can move in droves, which they have done in recent times with the coffee market, into the futures market with no desire to ever take a physical delivery of the coffee. All they want to do is buy and sell. They're going to get a contract, they're going to sell a contract, they're going to make the money in the middle. So I think this is where the C market becomes a little bit more complicated. And also for some people, we have to bear in mind that it's not just coffee buyers and coffee sellers functioning in this space. So that's kind of a really critical thing, I would say. Right, how was that, Kat?
that was great. I'm gonna have to watch this like 3 times, I think, to like let it sink in.
There'll be a test at the end.
Yeah, right. Because I feel like it's just like beyond my comprehension, the fact that, those volumes of coffee are huge, first of all, like container loads. Second of all, that I think that people are buying and selling not coffee, but promises to either sell or deliver coffee in the future. Yeah. And then the last thing that you mentioned, that it's people who are promising to buy and sell coffee in the future, but then it's also people who have, as you said, liquidity, which is a way to say the money. They have like cash money that they can come in and they see this money moving and they think, okay, I have a bunch of money. I don't care about coffee, but I can, if I play my cards right, I can buy low because I have cash. I can buy this promise low and I can sell this promise high, and then I make the money in the middle. But it's not about coffee at that point. It's just about making money.
Making money. Exactly.
Which is like, I think the dimension that's like, what the heck? Why? Why can they do that? But then that also brings up the question, kind of my next question is like, why, what impacts the C market price of coffee? Like, why has it been going up in the last months?
I think that honestly, there's been a lot happening. I think we are seeing, geopolitical movements that are beyond many people's comprehension. Initially we had, of course, EUDR, which, although wouldn't have affected those of you in North America, did affect the global market. So EUDR was the European Union deforestation regulation, which, by the way, is still in play. But it is just, I'm managing a thumbs up without even trying. That was impressive. But it's been delayed, right? So we saw a delay. So I think initially we had some issues around that. It would be very remiss of me to not point out that one of the biggest issues we have in coffee is climate change. You know, contrary to what some world leaders are currently telling us at the moment, climate change is a phenomenally huge issue in coffee production. So we are seeing issues with things like yield. And also, you know, we've got cherries falling from trees. We've got, you know, unripes, higher numbers of unripes. We've got smaller screen sizes. You name it, we're getting it. We've seen logistical issues. We have had a bit of instability with currency as well, recent times. And of course, because the market has gone up, we are seeing big players in the realms of speculators. So there's actually something known as the COT report, COT, which is Commitment of Traders report. And it's very complex. You might look at it and glaze over or even wonder what on earth you're reading. But that essentially shows you the commitments. And, you know, at one point, I won't say this is current up to today because I haven't seen the most recent one. But I mean, the last COT report I looked at, something like 75% of the players in the market were speculators. So this has a massive impact on pushing the price up. Now, I think a lot of people are at the moment thinking, and this may eat into one of the next questions, Kat, I'm sorry, but maybe we just keep it rolling on that case. Sorry, hang on. Sorry, that was a call coming in. Someone going, no, kidding. So I think that, what we kind of are also looking at essentially is, yes, you know, a lot rides on numbers from Brazil. Like, there's no two ways about it. We are very dependent, the market is very dependent on production from Brazil, right? By far the biggest volume of production comes from there. I think there's a number of people that are kind of sitting and waiting to see what happens with Brazil. I mean, aren't we all? Because it will, you know, have an impact on price. But I think one of the things we have to be very mindful of is we must listen to what we are being told by producers. Now, I don't want to get too much into it because, again, it's really complex. And I'm also reading a few things that are contradicting each other. And I would rather, you know, really dig in and find out the kind of truth. But I think we are hearing reports that usually we have stocks of coffee. So in country, there would be stocks of coffee. In Europe, there would be stocks of coffee. Sitting in warehouses in North America, there would be stocks of coffee. But these have really seriously been depleted. So I think that, you know, yes, potentially we may see some good news from Brazil. We may not. And at the moment, I would say it really depends on which producer you speak to and from what region. But they had a very, very serious drought last harvest. And this will impact the plants. You know, essentially the plants will try to survive. And whilst they're doing their best to survive, what they're not doing is trying to reproduce. So, you know, cherry numbers could be lower, things like that. But it is kind of a really interesting time as we kind of sail towards the next harvest for both, I will say, for both Robusta and Arabica. So in Brazil, they produce a lot of Conilon. Of course, which is a Brazilian Robusta. The largest producer of Robusta is Vietnam. Vietnam have suffered with some really bad harvests as well. So that's also driven the price of Robusta up. And we do have to look, even though you may only be interested in one side of the market, because maybe perhaps you only buy Arabica, it's always really useful to also look at Robusta. And I would say, as a side note, keep an eye on cocoa as well. Because if the cacao market is going through the roof, which it has done, you really need to give consideration because growing conditions are very similar for cacao as they are to, you know, some coffees. And I think it's important that we look for indicators there. So, yeah, wild times.
Yeah, and the reason that impacts the price is because these contracts are, as we've said, for future coffee delivery. And so we're looking at the potential for Brazil, Vietnam, the world to create that coffee that has already been contracted. It's already been promised, but
not necessarily even cherries yet.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not cherries yet.
Exactly.
And so then we see that we have, this large volume of contracts. There are a lot of people who have promised coffee and a lot of people who have, promised to receive coffee, but then there isn't that much coming through, like, to suit those volumes. And so then that's just, basic supply and demand, that there's a lot of people who've said that they're going to buy and sell coffee. There's not very much coffee to sell, to buy and sell. And so that means the price goes up because a lot of people want it and there's not very much. So I think that's...
Yeah, exactly that. And I think it's good to kind of, at this point as well, again, maybe we're addressing one of the other questions, but I think it's really important for us to say that, like, please be very aware that this does not mean producers are earning double the money. Like, I cannot stress that loudly enough. I have read, I have seen, I have heard people talking about this and being very like, well, it's all right for the producers because they're earning a fortune. Let me tell you, this is not the case. Like, yes, there will be some producers that are earning more money at the moment, and great, good on them. Why shouldn't they? Historically, the C price has been disgustingly low at points, and I will say disgustingly low. I mean, it was only 2019, it was less than 90 cents a pound. I mean, it's absolutely criminal figures. So we've had, I mean, this is the bigger thing as well, right? We're referring to this as like a crisis in coffee. And why are people sitting up and talking about it? People are sitting up and talking about it now because it's affecting the buyers. They didn't sit up and talk about it in the same way in 2019 when you had producers literally ripping up their trees because they couldn't afford to harvest them. Where was the outrage? Where was the shock? Where was the horror, at that point? We saw the same in the early 90s when the quota system stopped from the ICO. We saw, a huge price crisis then. Like, we've had these price crises. They are ongoing all the time. The difference this time round is that it's affecting buyers. And so now everybody's listening. Now we're reading reports in the newspapers because it's affecting consumers and it's affecting ultimately roasters. And I think, we have to kind of think about all of that. And, if you are a producer, and again, I'll really simplify it. If you are, say, a Costa Rican producer and you have had a terrible harvest this year and you have half of the yield available to sell, it's irrelevant if you're selling it for twice the price because you don't have the same volume of coffee to sell. So you're not making any more money. And actually, if anything, you may still be making less money because of things like inflation. So, and also unstable currencies. So in Costa Rica, for example, where, local currency actually became quite strong for a time versus the dollar. Well, that sounds great, right? But it isn't great if you're paid for your coffee contracts in US dollars, which is what the market determines. Mm-hmm. So actually then it costs you more money to exchange and get your local currency and use that money. So, like, we have to dig into this. Like, and I don't get frustrated with that much. I like to think I'm quite patient and, really try to dig in and explain things. But I find these kind of throwaway comments quite upsetting because you only have to sit and speak to a producer to realize actually how much of a struggle it can be for them. Yeah. So I think that's, that is a really important thing for us to point out.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was the next question is, like, are producers getting paid more, or where is all of this money going? Who's, like, making bank on this? And I think you touched on it exactly, is that nobody is. Like, no, the producers have, in many cases, less coffee to sell. So if they're selling it if they're able to sell it for a higher price, they're still not making as much money. And of course, they're also, because of climate change, there's a lot more inputs that they're having to put in. In a lot of cases, they need to put in, well, for especially like commodity coffee, they need to spend more on like fertilizers. There's also labor shortages in many producing countries, and so they have to pay in order to get workers to pick their coffee, to maintain their coffee fields. They need to pay more in labor cost, and so costs for coffee production are rising. So even if they're what they're earning from sales is also rising, it doesn't mean that they're making more. And volumes are decreasing.
Yeah.
So again, like it's a basic economics of, I mean, I'm not an economist, but like, yeah, supply and demand. And if you don't have as much to sell, even if you sell it for more, you're not making more overall. And I think that as you mentioned, like 2019, I was not as far into coffee as I am now, or not as far as into this realm of coffee as I am now. But I remember, like, I had been a roaster for 2 years at that point. I remember seeing like one news story about a Brazilian farmer ripping up his plants because the coffee price had tanked, and as you said, like, they weren't even making enough money to be able to pay for the labor to pick the coffee. So why continue in coffee? And of course, what we're seeing now is there's less coffee supply. Partially, I mean, maybe this is me like overreaching, but like, I think partially because a lot of coffee farmers left.
Well, we've seen this a lot, right? With like the struggles to get new generations into coffee farming. Yeah. Like, why? Just why? If you have historically been paid an incredibly low price, it's very high risk. You know, you are at the mercy of ever-changing weather, which is becoming more and more challenging. You're struggling with logistics. You know, you could be in a producing country that has crazy high interest rates. So if you don't have the cash to pay your cherry pickers, you end up taking bank loans if you can even get them. You know, you can end up having to get yourself in debt before you've even begun. And, you know, it's such a struggle. And I think we have a lot of younger producers who maybe historically would have taken on the ownership of the farm, would have been involved in it. And now they're looking to it and they're saying, do you know what? I can leave, I can go to the city, I can get a job in tech, and I can not have any of this worry. So, like, this is not new information. We have been talking about this. We have been worried about this. We have been discussing this for years and years. Climate change is not new. I mean, I can remember reading, you know, reports more than 10 years ago that said we didn't have long left for Arabica, and everybody just ignored it. You know, it's just speculation. It's just people trying to, you know, panic us. But we're now finding ourselves in a position where all of these things are hitting us, all of these forces are kind of hitting us at once. And we've hit this kind of intersection of like just everything coming at us. And that again, you know, is leading into this kind of really crazy volatile time in the market.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of leads into the next question, is, will these prices be the status quo for the future? Obviously, we can't, if we knew, that would be great. If I had a crystal ball and I could say, oh, the price is going to go up to this, and then it's going to go down to that, and then it's going to stabilize here. Yeah. Like, obviously, we don't know that. But yeah, I think a lot of people are wondering what can we expect, or what can we even think to conceive of what will be the prices in the future.
Yeah, I mean, like you've rightly already said, it's impossible to speculate on it. I would never want to do that. I also can't tell people, you know, what they should do, when they should fix, when they should, you know, whether they should be open or fixed price, whatever. All I can ever do is give the facts. I think, you know, we have to read what we're being told. We have to listen to what we're being told, like, number one. And I'm really lucky, same as you, Kat, that in my role, I get to spend a lot of time with producers. You know, I speak to as many producers as I do roasters most days. And that can be super insightful. I mean, look at Peru. So Peru last harvest ran out of coffee. Like, there were so many defaults with Peru. It was unbelievable. Well, I say it was unbelievable. It was believable. We knew at the beginning of harvest there wasn't going to be enough coffee. And again, people ignored the warning signs. I can remember, so we have a colleague called Louisa. Hey, Louisa, if you watch this again. She is an absolute legend. And she speaks both Portuguese and Spanish, and speaks to a lot of producers. And she spends her time kind of researching and understanding what's going on the ground. And she then writes our harvest reports. and our blogs for Algrano. So that is a plug for those, because guys, even if you do nothing else with Algrano, read the blogs because they're really insightful.
That's how I keep updated.
And, you know, preach. But she said this at the beginning of the Peru harvest, that every indication I'm getting from every producer I speak to is that they're not going to have enough coffee. And honestly, people just ignored it. And we've had the same with Central America. You know, we knew that Central America would struggle because, you know, we heard that there was going to be shortages, lower yields. And at the same time, what happens with big buyers that want to contract large volumes of Peruvian coffee? Well, they get the defaults from Peru and they go, okay, I'm going to switch that out for Centrals. So people were contracting Central American coffees way before they usually were, which obviously means the commitment is already there, which means there's less availability for everyone else. I mean, we have seen just from some of our roasters, even, you know, smaller buyers who are maybe buying a few bags on shared shipments, like we have seen people creating contracts before samples are even available, because it's got to the point where we're saying if you sit and wait for samples, there may not be any coffee left when you come to contract it. So I think, you know, we are kind of seeing these cycles as well happen, and that is, you know, going to essentially continue. I can't see that we're going to get some, personally, again, I don't want to say either way, not being a speculator and all that, but I can't see, like, we'd have to have some pretty magical numbers out of Brazil to do away with this. And we'd also be talking about production in Brazil defying all climate change, which we know it hasn't done historically, and it has been heavily affected by it. So, you know, do I think we're going to get back to $1.80? I think if you're waiting for that, you're way braver than I am. Or maybe you're just not reading the signs, you're not hearing, you're not listening. And also, do I think we should? Absolutely not. You know, I think one thing that I hope this does for buyers is I hope it makes them look and assess and realize how historically low prices have been. And that actually, when we look at it, how can you expect people, and what are we doing as well? You know, as a specialty market, we're pushing. We constantly want better and better and better. And, you know, something has to give at some point. You cannot keep paying, you know, or expecting market prices to be low and then pushing more and more and more for cleaner and cleaner and, you know, higher scoring, higher cupping coffees. It just doesn't work. Like, the maths don't math, you know? So I think we have to be really mindful of that as well. Like, not only will we, but should we?
Yeah.
And I think that this is a really good opportunity for people to stop and look at how they buy their coffee and really kind of give consideration to it.
Yeah, I think this is a really good segue into, like, then what should most of us then in the specialty industry, like, how should we respond to this? Yeah.
It's a hard one. I think what you should do initially, and sometimes it hurts, like, this is painful, I'm not denying it. Trust me, I'm hand-holding a lot of people through it. I think we have to stop and realize that specialty coffee is associated with the C market. Whether you like the sound of that or not, it is linked. Like, we have to be very clear, and I know we certainly have one of our producers in this call, maybe even a few more, who I'm sure will vouch for this, because, again, I'm also not a producer and I don't want to speak for anybody. But, you know, specialty coffee is not separate from the greater coffee market. And we've done a really good job historically of marketing it as such. So we have, like, a whole generation of buyers who just perceive themselves as completely isolated from the C market. The C market is the big bad C market that only commercial buyers deal with, and assuming that because they buy specialty grade coffee, they're separated from it. And now people are realizing, oh my gosh, I am not.
Because specialty prices are rising as well.
I'm feeling it. Yeah. I've gone to get, you know, price for a new contract, and it's double what it was last year. So maybe I wasn't protected from it. So, you know, it's painful. And I say it's painful because it's actually, I think, for a lot of roasters, most of the roasters I know and I have the pleasure of working with, they really care about supply chains. They don't sit there as roasters and think, I don't really care if I've been, paying a low price historically. I just want it cheap as possible. Most people really care. And so that's what I mean by it being painful. Like sometimes you have to assess this and you have to realize like, okay, actually, I'm going to have to make some really big changes to kind of ride this wave and to make sure that we don't go back to historically low prices where we find ourselves in an even worse situation, where we're pushing and then, we're kind of causing even more damage in the long run. So I think we have to be really real about this. Coffee grows on coffee farms. Some coffee that grows on that farm will be specialty grade, some will not. And yes, some producers will focus on producing higher quality, high scoring coffee and micro lots. And yes, but they will also have volume coffee. They will also have lower grade coffees. So I think like as buyers, what we can do is we can realize that. We can understand that maybe the price of our previous, house blends and house coffees are now lower than what the base commercial price is for coffee, what the base market price is. I mean, I am talking to people who are now getting quotes for the equivalent of like a Brazil Santos. So let's say, just about a kind of 80-point coffee. Thereabouts. They are getting quotes and it is in the realms of like $9.50, $10 a kilo. And, previously they were maybe paying like £4.50, £5 landed. And they just can't believe it. They don't know what to do. But like, this is the situation we find ourselves in. So we have to look, I think, what we can do is assess what we have been buying, assess how we've been buying, and assess, what information do I actually have on my supply chain? One of the things that I find to be super useful, and it isn't a magic fix, let me tell you, but is to have communication directly with your growers. Speak to the producers you're buying from. If you don't have access to those producers, ask for it. And if you can't get it, then ask why you can't get it. Look for that traceability and transparency in the supply chain. Transparency and traceability is not just an A4 printed PDF that you can put on your website or give to customers. Like, let me tell you, you need to be able to sit down. You need to be able to have an online chat. You need to speak to your producers, because we also have to think about the information flowing both ways. Okay, so like if I have a roaster that says to me, I want to speak to the producer about this, because maybe if we buy maybe a smaller screen size, we could get a better price. Yeah, maybe you could. Maybe you could consider taking a slightly higher secondary defect count. Cut will still be very similar. Customers won't notice, but it will help them to export more coffee. It will work both ways. But at the same time, you have to include your producers in this conversation. You have to bring them to the table and you have to be open. And what I would say with that is you have to also allow information from you and your business and your country to flow back to producers. Because we can't just do what we've historically done, which is take. We take a low price, we take a volume of coffee, we take high quality, we take information, and we don't give anything back. So we have to flow that information back, because let me tell you, producers are as terrified of this crazy market as most roasters are. Yeah. They are not sitting there thinking, "Hey, this is amazing." Some maybe, but not the majority. And the majority of our coffee is produced by smallholders globally. And they are not the ones seeing the benefit of this. They are struggling. They are facing challenges. Cooperatives are really facing battles and struggles. Like, we have to work together and open that communication both ways. So that would be what I would highly suggest.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a really, really important thing to highlight, that the volatility, the fact that it went from $2, $3, $4 plus in a matter of months, like, everybody is afraid of that, because nobody knows, know, if it could do that in a matter of months, how high could it go? How low could it go? And then for producers, like, if they can't sell their coffee because the price is too high, if roasters aren't buying coffee because the price is too high, then they're not able to sell their coffee. They're not able to run their businesses. So I think the fact, pointing out that it's volatile and kind of scary for most of us out here is really important. And yeah, connecting with producers who you work with, top.
And it's hive mind, right? Like when you share that information and you have this information going both ways, do you know what? You can come up with some phenomenal concepts together. Like I have been so fortunate to be, I would say, almost a bystander, right? Because most of the time I facilitate a conversation, but I'm not the person that is driving it. Like I may do the introductions between, you know, a roaster and a producer, but the magic happens between them. And there is this incredible level of, you know, discussion that happens. And you can go into this call nervous and anxious and thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I don't want to force the price down, but I'm really going to struggle to pass that price on to my consumers. And you have these conversations with producers. And by the time you finish the call, you have a plan. You have a plan together. And I think the other thing is that when you have this communication, you know what's coming around the corner. You won't have this shock when you go to get a spot price and you're like, oh my life, the price has doubled since my last contract. Because do you know what? You'd have been hearing it from the farmer. You'd have been hearing, hey, listen, we have a really low yield this year. This is what I think we need to do. You know, the earlier they know, the earlier they get contracts, the safer they are. You know, the more they can, you know, they can draw finance on those contracts early. They're in a better position. You know, it works for everybody. So, you know, give that information, ask the questions, but also please, I beg people to give information back, because there is such a block of this flow of information back to origin, and it is vital, especially in times like this.
Yeah, absolutely. We have like 9 minutes left. If anyone has,
told you I was good at talking.
No, this was great. And like, yeah, I have learned so much every time we talk. I learn so much. So thank you, Emma.
Pleasure.
Great. So question, what kind of information should roasters be sharing back to producers?
That's a brilliant question. And I think, honestly, it depends on the producer. I would say ask, you know, what would you like to know? And it could be things as simple as, I'd like to know more about your market. You know, what do your consumers look for? It could just be, you know, it could be more generic information. It could be specific information about, you know, how your business operates and what you're kind of looking at doing. I would say there's probably not like one thing, one answer. Although, interestingly, next week I'll be at AFCA in Tanzania, which is the African Fine Coffees Association event. And we're actually hosting a workshop where we are taking roasters and producers get to come and ask questions. So ask me after next week, and I can probably tell you at least what a large cohort of African producers were asking the information on. But yeah, I think, you know, things like, you know, what customers are interested in, what works for your business. Is there a way that they could maybe secure more of your volume, you know, and you work together if you can buy more volume and commit a bit earlier on contracts, which helps them at origin. There may be, you know, there might be things you could do on pricing. You know, so just, I would say just try it where you can to be an open book and ask them what would help them and ask them what they would like to know. That would be my advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I know I've heard a lot of producers that I've spoken with, what they're curious about is, you know, what are the trends? What's popular for your customers as roasters? Because if, let's say, naturals are super, super popular, then the producer wants to produce more naturals so they have more coffee to sell versus, you know, doing all washed. That's a generic example, but yeah. And then also I've heard a lot of producers be concerned about, like, are your customers going to pay these higher prices? Like, the producers want to know if their roasters are going to be in business. Like, if consumers are going to be willing to pay these higher prices. Again, obviously, we don't all know the answers to these, but just be open
and and Carlos has agreed, and Carlos is an incredible producer in El Salvador, so if he says be open book, I say be open book. There was another question as well, Kat, I just noticed, which is, how can we deal with the new prices of a new crop and the old prices of an old crop with different qualities? The one lower quality has a higher price now. Thank you. You are going to see a lot of this. You are going to see a lot of this. And how to deal with it? Well, again, I think it's individual to your business. I am a great believer, as you'll probably gather in communication. I'm a great believer in education. I'm a great believer that we shouldn't withhold information when we could share it. So if it were me, I would maybe be communicating to roasters. I mean, in a more physical sense, and you might maybe be able to sort of jump in on this, Kat, but I would imagine that, on the green side, maybe you could consider things like, blending, so that you have, blending the older crop with the newer crop, so that you kind of are transitioning from a cut profile perspective in a kind of, first you're averaging the price. And secondly, of course, like cup quality, you're not noticing too much of a difference. But if that isn't possible, then I think, we have to be honest with customers. I think that we need to share what we know that's happening. They are seeing this in the press. They are seeing this in the media. This is, if they're coffee lovers, they've probably read a report about it. So it may not come as such a shock. I think we're also seeing, roasters are having to increase prices. I can't speak for North America, but I can certainly say for Europe and for sure the UK, that I don't think I've spoken to a single roaster that isn't doing a price increase imminently, because they are having to pay more for their green coffee. And this seems to be like a fairly industry-wide thing. So, if you're having to put in a price increase, this is maybe a good opportunity to discuss this with customers. And, kind of really battle it head on. But yeah, for me, I think it's always communication and being open and explaining.
Yeah. Emma, do you mind if I put our email addresses in the comments? So that
No, go for it.
People can send us questions if you have follow-up questions about this, or, I mean, this webinar conversation isn't like sponsored by Algrano, but both of us work for Algrano, and I think as Emma said in the beginning, like, we work for Algrano because we believe in the platform and how it allows roasters and producers to connect with one another. There's literally a messaging function, like a DMing function on the platform. So if you're like, how do I talk to producers? If you work through Algrano, you have that ability implicit baked into the platform. So yeah, I don't know, shameless plug for the thing that we both work for but also believe in.
Yeah.
And if you have any more questions about that, yeah, you can ask either of us. But if you don't, ask the importers that you work with, or producers have Instagram, they have WhatsApp, like, reach out to them. I know a lot of producers who would love to directly connect with roasters that they work with. So if you don't already, you can find them. They're on Instagram.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, reach out and have these conversations. I think you'd be surprised at how open, most producers are to it. Again, of course, I can't sit here and profess to speak for every producer, but everybody that I work with or have had the pleasure of dealing with really welcomes discussion. Especially at the moment, because they're trying to weather this the same as you are. And everybody needs to kind of, pull together and really open that discussion.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, both producers and roasters are businesses. Like, producers have farms that are businesses. They need to make more money than they spend. Roasters, you are also businesses. You need to make more money than you spend in order for a business to be viable. And so if you can both connect and you can talk and figure out what are those numbers, what are those volumes, what do you have to do to make that happen for both of you to, be viable businesses.
I think that's really beautifully put, actually. Like, I would really second that. Like, please don't think it's not you versus them. And I know when the prices go up like this, it can feel like that. I think you can see this increase in price, and this is happening for people that have had long-standing relationships with producers. They're still seeing these price hikes, and I think for some buyers, coffee, especially in specialty coffee, we're often like very emotionally attached, right? We're all very kind of, we love what we do. We're so into what we do. We're so driven by coffee. Most of us are obsessed by it, you know, whether you're a producer or a buyer or a consumer or whatever, but you know, this is what you do. And then when you see that price, sometimes it can feel like it's a bit of a kick, but just, you know, what you have to do is you almost have to try and separate that emotion and look at this from a business perspective, and this is not personal. You know, if a price from a producer you've been working with has increased, there's reasons for it. They haven't just thought, this will be a walk in the park, I'm just going to earn more money from this customer this year, you know. And you have to kind of discuss with them and say, okay, I get it. Tell me more about what's going on, you know, where you are, because if nothing else, this helps me communicate this out to my customers. If I'm paying more for the coffee and the coffee is scoring maybe a little bit lower than it was last year, then tell me why, because then I can tell my consumers, and hopefully it will, you know, lessen the pain of the price increases. So yeah, I think you have to just remember that you're kind of bringing this relationship together as partners within a business setting. You know, you are working together on this. You're not working against each other.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we've come to the end of our time. So thank you all for joining us. Again, if you have more questions, Emma@algrano.com. My email is kat@coffeepeople.org or kat@algrano.com as well. And yeah, this is, I think, just opening the door for conversation. These questions will continue, and there will be more answers later on. But yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Emma, so much for all of your insight, all of your information. That's great.
Well done for putting it together. Yeah. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining. I hope it was a little bit insightful, a little bit useful. And yeah, reach out on email, on Instagram. You've probably all got you know, our information there. And yeah, look forward to kind of any other questions you might have.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye.